good measure is actually sleep. It's actually a good gateway to get people to identify some aspects of stress that might be going on in their life. Well, we talked a bit about modern life. I guess there might be an element of stress is ubiquitous for lots of people. I've talked about some of the responses, the changes in muscular tension, butterflies in the stomach, dry mouth. Those are acute stress responses. In terms of our more chronic stress symptoms, what might be indicative of being stressed over a long period of time, a good measure is actually sleep. So some of the work that we've done in sport and military populations, it's actually a good gateway to get people to identify some aspects of stress that might be going on in their life. So when people, if we measure sleep and we get some data that shows people aren't sleeping well, often that might link into some aspect of chronic stress or some aspect that might be worth talking about or addressing. So sleep and measuring sleep is an interesting way. Thinking about some of our lifestyle behaviors, we know that under stress, people are much more likely to crave, um, high calorie foods, sweet foods, not having time for things that we typically have enjoyed in the past. So changes in behavior, changes in diet, changes in sleep might be good indications of chronic stress, as might be some of our social connections, not having time for those people that are important to us, or perhaps being a bit short with some of those people when we do interact with them, because we've got so many things going on in our minds. So those are good indicators of chronic stress.
Okay, so let's talk about what we can actually do about some of this. So we're going to talk very, very broadly. I think this is just for the general kind of population managing more chronic life stressors. And I know there's a lot of variability, but just looking at some general principles that might be helpful to most people in most circumstances. I think I like the little pathway that you have. If we go through each of those individually, if we start with the threats and demands themselves, is there anything that we can do to kind of improve how we manage those?
Yeah, so I think the first step is probably just to identify and be self-aware about what some of those stressors, some of those demands, some of those threats might be. And I think that's a helpful starting point. And I think there are some occasions where it is not possible to change or to remove yourself from those um, particular threats or demands. Sometimes it might be. Sometimes it might be possible to say, well, actually, I find that quite stressful. I don't think it's important for me, but I might, I don't have to do that. But identifying what those stresses and demands are is a great starting point, because what that then enables you to do is to think about, well, okay, if those are the demands that I'm faced with, how can I build up my resources to enable me to cope with those demands? And then that really takes us into lots of those things that we've talked about in terms of perceptions of control, the confidence, the skills, what social support can I draw on? How might I perceive my response differently in that situation, change my perception of that particular situation from what I think about it now to something that's more positive and more adaptive. So that self awareness about the demands, identifying those leads us into the resources then.